Let's explore the dilemma of meditation causing you anxiety instead of calm. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. The person wrote, I've just started meditating and now my life has been turned upside down. Has anyone else had similar experiences? The individual wrote, I've always been quite sensitive to other people, but now I'm extremely sensitive to the world around me and find spending my time alone meditating is best. So, it is not my job to be a predatory ghoul out to accuse you of real or imagined character flaws. But it is also not my job to be little Susie Sunshine and use my enchanted straw to blow sunshine up your nose. What my job is to help you and help you see that to explore what you're going through and determine whether it's beneficial or harmful, and if there is a solution if it's harmful and a way to capitalize upon it if it's beneficial. So those who experience chronic lifelong sensitivity is a red flag for neurodivergence. I am not a neuroscientist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not an MD. But I've gone through the battery of testing for both ADHD and autism. And I recommend that people who could describe themselves as lifelong sensitives do that as well. There's another red flag in this text that you wrote that also indicates that. Don't feel bad. Like I said, I have autism, I have ADHD, exacerbated by fetal alcohol exposure, birth trauma, brain damage, CPTSD, dysautonomia, and what's it called? Epstein-Barr virus, resulting in chronic fatigue syndrome. All these things affect each other. And I'm not saying this to feel pity for myself, but to say that knowing our strengths, our unique strengths and our unique limitations help us to better navigate meditation specifically and life in general. And there is great potential empowerment in knowing that our experience is not random or weird, but shared by between 3 to 9% of the general population. It's really useful to know that one is potentially not the lone gopher. So when we feel, so it's one thing to withdraw from humanity because we are fatigued. The third enlightenment factor is energy. Energy is a barometer for the met or unmet needs of our body. And rest, fresh air, sunshine, exercise, healthy, whole foods, these are requirements for physical health. And since our mind is in our brain and our brain is in our body, if we want to have a good meditation life, we've got to tend to our body. So withdrawing because you've become exhausted is brilliant. It prevents meltdowns. It prevents rash decisions. However, if withdrawing from others becomes a constant or it becomes a constant desire, that is a red flag. Not for us as a human being, but for the techniques we've been applying, for the meditation techniques we've been applying. Why? Why would I say that? In the ancient writings attributed to the Buddha, whether he or she was real or merely archetypical, there is a passage where Ananda says, or is it Shariputra? One of the two says, Lord, is it accurate to say that half the spiritual life is about our relationships, to which the Buddha says, no, the entirety of the spiritual path is about our relationships. So this is important. So 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness. When something in our meditation practice is exacerbating our need for alone time to the point where we find other people unbearable, that is a red flag, and we must remember that the second enlightenment factor is sometimes translated as investigation. I prefer to translate it as curiosity. The first enlightenment factor is mindfulness. Now, when we are defensive towards that which we notice, that's bad news. But when we are vulnerable and curious about what we notice, that's good news. So we have to be vulnerable and look for patterns, not as a tool to condemn ourselves, but to fine-tune our contemplative life. I hope that makes sense. Let's continue. The good-hearted individual continues. I'm currently in the process of getting rid of all my belongings so I can go and live in nature, away from the world, to figure out what's going on, grow, and know. Well, that is really beautiful and deliciously idealistic. I went through that phase when I was 19. I think it was it 19? Was it 18? It's tough to remember. It's been so many years. But this is a red flag. In the world in which we live in right now, there is no unowned property, which is a weird thing in and of itself. All property now is private or it's owned by the government, which means if we're on property without permission, we can get arrested and thrown in jail. If we are just trying to live in nature, which should be the birthright of every earthling, because of the perversity of late-stage capitalism, where everything is the property of someone somewhere, that cannot be done legally. I would not recommend incarceration. The Buddha lived in a culture where there was no late-stage capitalism. There were publicly owned lands, artist-free lands that no one claimed possession of. But the way things are in this country, we have to be, although as innocent as doves, but as wise as serpents. And so, while it's great to take a balanced, sustainable, minimalist approach, the key word is sustainable. It's useful to have garments appropriate to the season. Ask the soles of your feet. They'll tell you, we like shoes or sandals, as opposed to sharp stones, burrs, and thistles. So, possessions are not good or bad. They are merely tools. And we want to take a balanced, sustainable approach. So, a healthy meditation practice neuroscience has shown that a healthy meditation practice, a healthy mindfulness practice, will light up our autonomic nervous system in such a way as to create a fringe benefit where we are able to live in the flow state. Now, this flow state is not a scattered spontaneity like one might experience after consuming their third espresso in 30 minutes, but it's more like the centered spontaneity, and then when our choices and our utterances and our deeds flow from this centered spontaneity, then life can be a paradise on earth, regardless of whether we live in a homeless shelter or a prison or an apartment or a tiny home or an RV or a condo or a house. regardless of where one lives, it can feel more and more beautiful, if not literally, then figuratively. So I assure you, I'm too much of a wussy to take delight in defecating all over your life. That's not my idea of a good time. What's my idea of a good time? A big salad and watching sci-fi. That's a good time to me. Now my mouth's watering. So, but I'm trying to use my life experiences and what expertise I possess to help you dodge what landmines you can. I hope you appreciate that. Let's continue. I have no interest in friendships or family or anything else in this material world has to offer, and I'm totally content with this. Perhaps you were, but remember, the Buddha said our relationships are integral to the path. 50% of the Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness. If we have if we're experiencing an aversion to humans and relationships and interactions, that is a red flag. You see, Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything blows, but not in the fun and tingly way. There are many personal attributes that we can organize archetypically. Here's an easy one. Real or imagined, Gautama, who became known as the Buddha, had a cousin known as Wicked Devadatta. And so we can organize human attributes by which they align with. So Devadatta thought that it was just splendid to be rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. The Buddha thought it would be much better to be flexible, loving, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. This world has many wonderful tools and many wonderful people. There are people who have knowledge about the lost or the almost near lost art of forest farming and sustainability and ways to repair the planet, ways to repair humanity, ways to repair society. These things, this knowledge and these people are treasures. Forgive me for being crass, but I am really enthusiastic about toilet paper. I think it's a wonderful thing. I'm really enthusiastic about cats and dogs and neighbors and going on walks with my neighbors and shooting the shit and just nurturing relationships. The author of the Blue Zone Diet found that one of the common denominators of longevity was our experience, our meaningful friendships with family and friends and neighbors. So when we lose interest in relationships, that is a red flag. It doesn't mean we're a bad person, doesn't mean we're stupid, but it does mean, to quote Bugs Bunny, that we perhaps have taken a wrong turn in Albuquerque. Often it happens because society has some absurd assumptions about what the Buddha taught, and there are more bad teachers than good teachers. So if you've taken a wrong turn in Albuquerque, that's less of an indictment against you and more of an indictment about society's assumptions and the blathering of bad teachers. Let's continue. For the past 6 weeks, I've been feeling out of this world, sensations in my head and hands, but I also feel energy moving all throughout my body, although this part is nothing new to me. So, the first enlightenment factor is mindfulness. The very fact that you're able to notice phenomena occurring within your body is useful. It's useful. Let's continue. This sensation in or above my head is always there from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep. These feelings vary a lot. It used to be just intense pressure, like the weight of another person sitting on my head. If the direction of the feeling was directed upwards, once it felt like my head might actually pop off and shoot upwards. That reminds me of a grisly sci-fi short I watched earlier this week. Now it's usually just a feeling of presence or a sucking feeling pulling up through the top of my head. Once or twice it felt like a very pleasurable, cool breeze. It felt great. Often my whole head feels like it's vibrating with energy. I feel every cell tingling out of my physical head even. Sometimes my head feels massive. Other times my head feels stuck, like it's dimensionally stuck. In that position, perfectly frozen still, just right as my head is popping with energies. Okay, so the first fold of the eightfold path is the right view of impermanence. This is not an intellectual exercise. The more time we sit in mindfulness, reliant upon the inner workings of our sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the thoracic region of our spinal cord, the more we notice change. We notice change in sights and sounds and sensations, as well as flavors and scents and the like. We also notice changes in emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. We notice changes in the outer world, the inner world, the physical, the mental. We notice changes in pleasure and pain and the interesting stuff and the boring stuff and the glorious stuff and the grotesqueries as well. We effortlessly observe change, for as the Roman philosopher once stated, it is the only constant. Now, I've said all that to say this. If our primary experience is pertaining to our head, that's what many energy workers would describe as stuck energy. And it is more harmful than it is beneficial. Whether you were reading the Theravadan writings, the Mahayana writings, or the Vajrayana writings, energy circulation is always mentioned directly or inferentially. When it gets stuck in one place, it does far more harm than good. Once again, I do not say this to beat you up, but to let you know that someone's advice given to you has led you down a destructive path. It's totally, you're not stuck. You're not like a kitty cat whose head is stuck in an empty bag of Doritos. You can backpedal your way out. It's easier than you might have thought. In fact, even today's exercises might help. So let's continue. Other times my whole head is weightless. These feelings really do vary a lot. Strange things are happening inside my head. Oh, joy. I feel pressure between my eyes when someone walks past me, almost like I can feel their attention is on me. Okay, this is really important. I'm glad you put almost, because it's important in our own life to recognize the difference between a simile, a metaphor, and a literal statement. Because it's one thing to say it feels like their attention is on me, doesn't necessarily mean their attention is on me. And this flexibility is crucial to our happiness in life generally and our success upon the path of enlightenment specifically. Have you ever met someone who was rigid? They weren't very peaceful, were they? This pressure feels like pushing your thumb into your head. Ouch. Other times I feel this randomly when no one is around. So this is a really important red flag that you have some unmet needs physically as well as spiritually. These are not indictments. You are not a bad person, but you do have unmet needs, and the meeting of those needs is something you deserve. Your birthright is to become a Buddha. Society needs all the Buddhas it can get. Unmet physical needs, unmet medical needs, it can not only hobble your journey, but hobble the world around you and deny it the benefit it could receive from another enlightened entity. Let's continue. I cannot feel my body when I meditate. Sometimes it feels like I'm a bundle of pure energy growing bigger than my physical body. Sometimes it's like I'm floating. Now, if it was going to be crass, I would tell you that if you eat enough beans, you will float, at least for a few seconds. Fortunately, I'm not that crass and would never even think of such an off-color joke. I know what it feels like to be totally empty, to let go of this physical body cell by cell. So, that's cool, but emptiness is always meant to be a metaphor that we do not have to force. Allow me to illustrate. We're wired to notice during our inhalation, thanks to our sympathetic nervous system. We're wired to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. However, every time we exhale, thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system, we're wired to physically relax and mentally release, as if that which we noticed during our previous inhalation was as non-graspable as a vast empty void. So our experience of emptiness is supposed to fluctuate. It's supposed to fade as we breathe in, increase as we breathe out. Like everything else, things move. We observe the changing of the seasons. We observe the waxing and the waning of the moon. We watch the rising and the setting of the sun. And as we set our hands upon our chest, we could feel it swell and sink with the passing of a breath. The first enlightenment factor is mindfulness. The Buddha taught there were 4 bases of mindfulness: the physical, the interpersonal, the mental, and the circumstantial. We are wired to perceive these automatically. If something is hindering that perception, it's a red flag. And it's tempting to tell ourselves stories. Sometimes those stories can be scary, and that's not sustainable. Sometimes those stories can be self-aggrandizing. That's also not sustainable. The wisest of all are comfortable saying, I've observed thus and such. It might be this, it might be that, it might be something else. I'm not 1,000% certain. There is great power in uncertainty and great peril in being a little too sure, a little too rigid. Let's continue. However, I'm sure if I continue to let go, something crazy might happen as I start to become something else. So, on one hand, we're always becoming something else. Every 7 years, every cell in our body is replaced at least once, often several times in that period. So we're very much like the philosophical mind experiment of the ship of Theseus, where every X number, every unit of time passes, something is replaced on the ship. Maybe a piece of wood, maybe a brass fitting, maybe a rope, maybe a sail, until eventually everything on the ship has been replaced. It is no longer the same ship. So we are like that. We are always in a state of flux. The question is, are we evolving or devolving? Are we evolving to the benefit of ourselves and others, or to the detriment of ourselves or others, if there even is such a thing? So, fortunately, the Buddha taught that full enlightenment isn't it's simply just mastery of the Eightfold Path. Now, the mastery of the Eightfold Path is two-part. There's a physical component and a mental component. In Buddha's day, in the Iron Age, learning to sit or being comfortable at sitting for 75 minutes at a pop was effortless. People did that their whole lives. But now in the Silicon Age, it's challenging. However, we can incrementally get better and better at sitting until we can do it. We can incrementally increase the duration of our sitting until after 15 weeks or so, we have acclimated to it, which is good news. But mentally, it's much quicker. The Buddha said, hey, we can master his path in less than 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or wait for it, even 7 days. So the mastering of the Buddha's path does not have to be a difficult, arduous affair worthy of a Tolkien epic. It does take me a couple of hours before I begin exploring these feelings. Remember the words of Einstein. Any educated idiot can make things more complicated, more difficult, and more violent. However, it takes a lot of courage and a little bit of genius to move in the opposite direction. We can always find difficult ways of doing something. But just because something is difficult doesn't mean it's beneficial, no less superior. You're better off meditating for an hour or condition yourself to meditate for an hour. And then do that. Either once every 12 hours or 4 times a day, depending upon your schedule. There is something known as the jhanas, and people think it's mysterious, but it's not. Every night when we fall asleep, we experience the 8 jhanas in descending order. Every morning when we wake up, we go through the jhanas in reverse order. It's already wired into us. It's nothing special. The people who are really into being rigid and fearful and controlling and elitist, oh man, they just think it's amazing. It ain't no big deal. Remember, one of the synonyms for enlightenment is, quote, nothing special, unquote. So just because we sit in meditation for 2 hours and bizarre things happen, that doesn't mean it's beneficial. An hour is sufficient. I promise you. You can master the Buddha's path 1 hour every 12 hours in a ridiculously short period of time. In the words of the owner of the Man's Fashion Warehouse, I guarantee it. I like to meditate as much as I can, but I do have my limits. We all do. Usually a couple of hours from the moment I wake up, a couple of hours in the day, and a couple of hours before sleep. That's a lot. You may, if you limit your meditation, you may benefit from it. If you vary your meditation, sometimes sitting, sometimes walking, that could really help. I've been having all these cool ideas for years, which I would later read or learn about elsewhere. So this is what I wanted to mention. Those of us who are neurodivergent are notoriously acute at pattern recognition. We can recognize patterns quicker than neurotypicals can. We can recognize patterns more vividly, more acutely than neurotypicals can. Now, some could get into magical thinking and thinking that that's some, great metaphysical thing, but it's just advanced pattern recognition. I have it, my partner has it, so we are killjoys when watching a movie or a series, because we're like, oh, we see where this is going. It's kind of like that internet meme, which I find amusing. I've seen enough MAGA to know where this is going. So pattern recognition does not mean you're spooky, does not mean you're weird, does not mean you're being controlled by infernal entities. It just means there's a high probability you have the inconvenient gift of having a flavor of neurodivergence. Congratulations, you might very well be a Stradivarius violin in a vast ocean of kazoos, which is both a blessing and an inconvenience at the same time. Welcome aboard. So once again, I am not a therapist, I am not licensed, but I recommend getting evaluated by someone who has expertise in that area. Not an MD, not a GP, someone whose entire career is built on the identification and management of neurodivergence. That's just my view of things. I might be wrong. It's like I know things I shouldn't know, and I don't know how. Yep, when I was a member of a Christian cult many decades ago, I would get in trouble for that. I would say, hey, we should be doing this and such, and they would just beat me up. And then 6 weeks later, a leader from another part of the country would say, we should start doing this and such. So once again, it wasn't because I was super spiritual. It was just because I had autistic pattern recognition. Unforgettable dreams, which I documented about a year ago, have been happening in my life recently, happening exactly same thing. Let's continue. Not just the audio or visuals, more importantly, the feelings deep inside my spirit, which I distinctly remember from my dreams. Yep, same thing. I couldn't stop thinking about these dreams for weeks after I experienced them. It's like we have a communication of emotions through our spirits, which we cannot describe. The language of the spirit is too powerful for words. No, it's not. So here's the thing. History hates a gap. Humans are wired to tell themselves stories and to tell others stories. It is one of our greatest strengths and one of our greatest weaknesses. If we view stories as mere possibility, it's harmless. But the more we regard them as a certainty, the more potentially harmful they become. So it is far more empowering to say, this may be it, this might not be it, I'm not really sure. The closer we inch our way to certitude, the closer we come to the precipice. Let's continue. A lot of other weird out of these world things have been happening too that I don't feel comfortable sharing, as everyone seems to think I'm crazy. And I am now aware that we are not actually in control of our own minds or thoughts. Good, that is important to recognize. Both particle physicists as well as neuroscientists, or I should say the majority of neuroscientists, the majority of particle physicists no longer believe in free will. That you and I and everybody else are merely surfing a wave of causality. That is greater than the very short bubble of our own lives. There are many other forces outside of this physical dimension in play, and a lot of information conditioning we've been marinating in our whole life, which is a lie. So once again, I'm going to remove this certitude and say quite often a lie or quite often mistaken. But yes, we each are affected quite negatively by our assumptions and the assumptions of society as a whole. Big time. Big time, big time, big time. They are very distinctive, strong experiences, feelings that simply cannot be mistaken for anything else I've ever experienced or heard exists in my lifetime. Things can be mistaken. Do not underestimate the human ability to make a mistake. If you don't believe you're capable of making a mistake, I encourage you to be in a relationship, and you will see that you make mistakes, your partner makes mistakes, and on. And I can assure you I'm not crazy like what people keep telling me. Now, forgive me for being a pain in the ass, but that reminds me of the first line of the Telltale Art. I'm not crazy. or if you're an OG like myself and you remember Institutionalized by Suicidal Tendencies, the chorus of the song is, I'm not crazy, you're the one that's crazy. All I wanted was a Pepsi. Oh, how I love that song. Anyway, if anyone has information or insight on what might be happening to me, please get in touch. Yes, everything you're experiencing is malleable. And just as our inner ear causes us to stand up, sit up straight, and walk straight, regardless of whether we are on a plane or an inclined surface or an uneven surface, similarly, we have mechanisms that can right our experience. In Tibet, the Tibetan masters have a way of saying that there are our meditation sessions, and then there are the spaces of life between our meditation sessions. Both are valid. So yes, this is totally doable. And if you still are with me and I haven't scared you off, let's meditate together as a team after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This oddly dressed fellow is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of Hinduism, Taoism, and each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. This morning, I thought it could be great fun if we practiced the Buddha's secular path of mindfulness, meditation, and contemplation. To the power of breathing, posture, and words, we will profoundly change our experience of ourselves and the world in which we find ourselves. So these 16 exercises are divided into groups of 4. Let's begin with the first group of 4 right now. We begin with Kaya Sati's only set of 4 preliminary meditations that center on our bodies. Oh, that's weird. That is super weird. All right, so we're going to recite a rather cryptic rhetorical question. As we breathe in, we're going to silently and mentally recite how. As we exhale, we could silently and mentally recite long. Now, we're asking a question about our breath. How long is our breath? But it's not our job to actively answer the question. So let's play with this question for approximately 2 sets of 16 rounds. The easiest way to count to 16 rounds is this. We can consider a round to be a set. 1 inhalation followed by 1 exhalation. That's a round. It's possible to count 16 rounds upon the creases and the tips of our 4 left fingers. I like to advance my left thumb during each inhalation. Now, I'm going to breathe much faster than you because I've been doing all this talking. You're welcome to follow along with me if you wish. Let's begin. So remember, this question is not active, it's passive. Yes, come let us be the contemplative version of a pillow prince. And now begin the second set of 16 breaths. During this exercise, we mindfully notice and even investigate our relaxingly longer, gentle exhalations. Remember that mindfulness is the first of 7 enlightenment factors. We come to the second of centering's 4 physical preliminary practices, where we mindfully notice and even investigate the coalescence of our invigorating, sharper inhalations. This is the third enlightenment factor, also known as energy. So here's the cool thing. Simply by playing with words, we are gently guiding our unconscious mind. We come to the third of centering's 4 physical preliminary practices, where we allow our minds to mindfully notice and even investigate our bodies. And so, as silently and mentally we recite Bear with me. This is weird, isn't it? So silently and mentally, let us recite feel, form. We're just giving ourselves permission to be vulnerable to the sensations that are already there, whether or not we're aware of them in the moment. We come to the fourth of centerings for physical preliminary practices, where we allow our bodies to tranquilly relax, which is the fifth of 7 enlightenment factors. So calming is not something we're forcing on our body. Calming is already latent to every exhalation due to the parasympathetic nervous system ensconced within both the lower lumbar region of our spinal cord as well as the tippy top of the cervical region. We're not forcing anything, we're not contriving anything, because that doesn't go anywhere cool. And remember, form is just a nickname for our body. So we're not lying to ourselves with affirmations, telling ourselves our bodies are calm when they're not. As we silently and mentally recite calm, we're just noticing that that's what our body is wired to do. We're just basically harmonizing our intention with the calming mechanism which is already latent within each exhalation. You might call it our factory installed wiring. One of the very nice things about these 4 exercises, they help bring us back into our body, especially if we have been enduring the sensations of being pulled or drawn or sucked out of our body as if by a great celestial hoover. We continue with Vedana Sati Seta 4 jhana meditations that center our feelings. When you realize how easy this is, it might disappoint the corner of your heart that is reserved for elitism. By the by, if you've just tuned in, welcome aboard. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or how to apply them, ain't no need to be shy. Simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. My only request is simple. A, don't wait till the end of the live stream, for by then my brain will be tapioca pudding. And B, if you're going to type a question, be sure to click the send button. Otherwise, I'll never receive it. And when I do receive it, there'll be a time lag, so if I take a while to answer your question, please don't take it personal. We begin with the first of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the first jhana's invigorating, blissful joy that flows from gently grinning with the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, and the crow's feet of our eyes towards our bodies of flesh, blood, and bone. And we get to do all of that effortlessly and automatically through the power of words. As we breathe in, we could silently and mentally recite the verb grin. And as we exhale, we could silently and mentally recite the noun form, which functions as a synonym of body. We continue with the second of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the second jhana's peaceful joy. Joy being, of course, the 4th enlightenment factor. So we savor the second jhana's peaceful joy that flows from gently grinning, once again, with the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, and the crow's feet of our eyes, towards our thoughts, tendencies to emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. No, I'm not going to lie to you. Some of our emotions or memories or thoughts are downright painful. Sometimes they're grotesque. But by simply playing with the verb grin, by playing with the noun thought, in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation, we begin to make peace with even the most unwelcome of experience. And anybody who has survived trauma knows we can have plenty of unwelcome experiences between our ears. Let's continue with the third of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the third jhana's contentment, which may be a new experience for us. By mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our thoughts, tendencies to emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. So coalescence, that which naturally occurs during our inhalation, is the 6th of 7 enlightenment factors. So we've departed from grinning to feeling, which is considerably more vulnerable. Now, we're not forcing the feeling, it's natural. Perception, vulnerability is the birthright of our sympathetic nervous system. But that doesn't stop it from being uncomfortable. And as you've probably guessed, we're using the word thoughts as an umbrella term. We come now to the fourth of four feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the fourth jhana's neutrality by allowing our thoughts, emotions, intentions, reasonings, recollections, and imaginings to tranquilly relax. Whoops, look at that. To paraphrase a late Theravadan teacher, everything arises, everything passes away. Whether our emotions are pleasant or painful, whether they are coarse or subtle, it's not our job to control them, but to merely observe them as we breathe in and relax into our exhalation. We continue with Chitta Sati's second set of 4 jhana meditations, this time that center our mind. And you can ask, well, what's the difference between mind and thoughts? It's just a degree of subtlety. If thoughts were like the coarse machinations of emotion, intention, cognition, recollection, and imagination, the mind is simply perception. We begin with the first of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 5th jhana's metaphoric sphere of infinite spaciousness by mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our mind's ability, look at that, to see, hear, feel, taste, smell, and the like. So the verb feel is just giving us permission to be vulnerable to whatever is going on. Mind in this context is a synonym of awareness, or Rigpa if you prefer Tibetan. We continue with the second of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 6th jhana's metaphoric sphere of infinite awareness, which we generate by allowing our mind to invigoratingly gladden. As towards it we gently smile, once again, from the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, and the crow's feet of our eyes. We come to the third of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 7th jhana's metaphoric sphere, whoopsie, look at that, of non-graspability. As we allow our minds, seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and the like, to tranquilly relax in the most sustainable way. We have evolved to look for patterns. However, we learn that correlation does not guarantee causality. And so although we might have a hunch, we might feel that there's a causal relationship between two phenomena. It's okay to let go and not clutch onto it tightly. We come to the fourth of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 8th jhana's metaphoric sphere. Ooh, that's weird. Of acquiescent non-labeling. By experiencing the liberating equanimity of our controlling tendencies to push and pull, remedy and cultivate. Our mind is like a soccer field or a football pitch, and our thoughts are like the players thereupon. We conclude with Dhammasati, also known as Anika Vipassanas, set of 4 impermanence contemplations to help us circumstantially let go. We begin with the first of 4 passive contemplations. Where we invigoratingly consider coarse impermanence. We continue with the second of 4 contemplations. Oopsie, passive contemplation. That's an important distinction. Let's copy that bad boy and paste it over yonder. Where we consider subtle impermanence. Now we come to the third of four passive contemplations. Where we consider very subtle impermanence. Now we conclude with the fourth of four passive contemplations, where we consider relinquishing, surrendering, and letting go. Let's seal our practice by chanting a portion of the first chapter of the Dhammapada. But to make it interesting, let us chant it percussively. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. in approximately 10 1/4 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.